Hey guys, hope you've been having a great week and welcome to another episode of the Q&A. Gonna do this one today and tomorrow I may have something up on predictions for Season 2 of The Living World. Now that the feature pack is out, I've already begun to get a lot of people saying to me, hey WP, when do you think Season 2 of Living World is beginning? I don't think that people are like bored at the moment in the game and have nothing to do, not by a long way, but now that is the next thing on the horizon, and I'm quite keen to discuss with you guys on what might be happening there. Anyway, the footage in the background is probably a variety of a great many things. I've been doing a lot of world versus worlding. I was saddened to learn the true state of Edge of the Mists this week, which is basically that there are no real battles ever going on there. Most of the intended ideas behind that map are completely devalued, and people simply use it as the new champ train, particularly with Frostgorge Sound in particular being nerfed. This is a great place to go in champ train. I've got to be honest, I've been doing it myself. It's got everything you want from a champ train, except the fact that you also have free waypoints, and you're getting a bunch of world experience stuff and meta event completion too. I mean, what's not to love? But it is a real shame to see exactly what's going on with that map. So you might see some footage there. You might see some footage of us nuking down unsuspecting groups with Shadow Refuge meteor showers, and maybe some dungeon running things in there as well if I feel like there was actually a good run. It seems to be whenever I turn on the camera, the runs go to hell. Dungeons, by the way, also I'll add to you guys, this is something I never talked about in my previous feature patch videos, are really easy now. The critical damage scaling that the devs have put in the game at low level zones has made so many of those early dungeons all the way up through Sorrow's Embrace ridiculously easy, particularly Ascalon Catacombs. You could solo incredibly comfortably and quickly. It's just kind of nuts to see. In particular, it saddens me that the Great Jungle Worm is now very easy to do, but that might get its own video entirely. Right, on to the questions. Let's start with Recalibre Gears, who says, question, I've been a long-time player of GW2 and have played since its release. I'm also one of the players who have crafted 2 of the same legendary Incinerator. Now, with the release of skins, do you think I should delete one of my Incinerators? Because I have no reason to keep it, I never swap stats, and it has the same stats and benefits that Ascended has, or hold onto it in the hopes that they might improve dual wielding aesthetically, like they did the Eternity or over the Twilight and Sunrise skins. I don't think they're going to make any changes here at all, so I wouldn't hold on to it hoping for them, but I do think if you've got 2 legendary daggers, you may as well keep them. On my Elementalist at the moment, I crafted for the first time an Ascended weapon, and what I crafted was an Ascended dagger. This is because I almost, when I have the Minstrel, have every single Elementalist weapon in legendary form, and that means I can swap stats at Ascended quality for every single combination I could think of, except for dagger, so I needed an Ascended dagger. I can say to you, if you've got 2 of these things, there's no reason to get rid of it. Like, an Ascended quality weapon that you can swap the stats on is obviously better than Ascended quality weapon that you can't swap the stats on. I don't think it's due any time in the near future, but if there does come a day where your Assassins or Berserkers stuff isn't ideal, then you'll be sad you got rid of the one you can freely swap the stats on, right? There's just no reason to get rid of it. I have seen some distaste from people saying, oh, they've really made legendaries worse with this patch because now you can dual wield almost for free and it really takes away that quality from those people. But overall, I do think it's a positive change. Personally, although I could be dual wielding my Incinerators right now, I don't want to. I've got so many cool skins, and so much of the game is about collecting skins. Why would I waste a potential slot on just something I've already got in my other hand? But the other thing to consider as well, if you play many different characters, you can throw that spare Incinerator onto an ult. I started playing Thief for the first time in a long time in Dungeons today, and it was actually awesome. This is the first time I've taken advantage of this. I took both my Ascended quality daggers off of my Elementalist. I took most of my Ascended Berserkers trinkets off of my Elementalist, slapped them all on my Thief, and knew that my Thief was supremely well geared without me really having to put any effort into it at all. It was actually really awesome. And that's an option for people with duplicate of the same legendaries too. You know, you get rid of having to fiddle around the bank all the time. You can just have it held on there. Moving on, the next question is from the Snack Bar, who says, hey WP, if the new changes to mega servers go into all the zones, how do you think the server-based TeamSpeaks and their world boss runs cope? It's hard enough to get a coordinated group together to do the triple threat with the set servers, let alone servers that aren't. Thanks for your time. This is an interesting idea, and I think the next time a big mega boss comes out, we're going to see a shift to how the community in general reacted when Tequatl came out and when the Great Jungle Worm came out. What we saw with those 2 bosses were servers getting together. It was servers that were doing the runs and fighting these bosses. It was servers that were the first to get the kills. Blackgate was the first server on NA for Tequatl. Desolation was the first server for EU over on the Great Jungle Worm. And it was a long time before it was specific guilds that were getting the kills. However, now with mega servers, you're right, how do people organize that? My thinking is that now, when a new boss comes out, because servers can't organize together in theory, we may instead see guilds are the first to be getting these kills, and I think that's actually a positive change. If you look at when the Great Jungle Worm out, I can't speak for EU, but for NA, when the Great Jungle Worm came out, there was one particular guild that was trying to go for a world first, and basically it was this guild versus servers, well, mainly the Blackgate server, and that was TTS. And for a long time, it was very much up in the air who would beat who. Now, when future world bosses come out, and this server element could potentially be eliminated altogether, and since so many guilds now exist based around those mega bosses because there have been 2 already added to the game, we can see real inter-guild competition, much like what you see with raids and so forth in other games, and that actually really excites me. I think there might still be a chance, having said all of that servers will still have a place when the new mega bosses come out. Let's not forget that although they seem to be broken right now, the mega servers are using some kind of algorithm that still sorts people based on their world, right? So this should mean if the algorithms are working correctly when the new mega boss comes out, a huge chunk of the players in-game are all going to be zoned on that same map. There'll be this intense population there, and the algorithms will still sort people server by server by server, and you may still have like a Blackgate server doing it, or a Blackgate based mega server doing it, and then an Emery Bay one and so forth, and then the team speaks for server based kills could still happen. It's going to be very volatile, and I'm curious to see whether guilds can actually start taking these kills first before the servers can, as a result of the new system. And you're totally right, it's gonna throw things out of balance. Speaking of balance, and just as a bit of a side note, I'm very, very disappointed with the scaling changes, as I mentioned at the start of the video, to the Triple Trouble Worm. For those of you who don't know, and I'm sure some people will be excited about this, it's really easy now. It comes up 3 times a day, once every 8 hours, and I'm pretty sure with just a little bit of guidance, even the most clueless and poorly geared pugs can beat this thing now. It's a real shame, in my opinion. One of the big things I was looking forward to with balance changes and new runes and sigils and things was how we could specifically optimize those new options for the worm, and now that just feels like all the steam has been taken out of us because you don't need to do any of that. It's now become something that takes very little effort, and a lot of the fun that was originally in that encounter is now gone. However, for those of you much more casual people who just maybe want a shot at some of the previously pretty prestigious Ascended armor you could get there, now it's kind of it's actually worthwhile to go. When that comes up and you see it on the new world boss list timer, actually give it a shot, because it's totally doable, and it's not what it once was, in my opinion, but I guess it's a bit of content now that's opened up for many players. Ben Far says, have you gotten anything in your PvP locker that you wanted for the wardrobe, like the PvP exclusive Masquerade armor, Lava Axe, and Dwayne bow? I've completely forgot about the Masquerade armor until it was too late, and I didn't have the wolf tokens to get anything except the gloves. I've got pretty much everything I could have ever wanted from PvP. I could make a video where I was like, yo guys, look at my wardrobe, and it's basically me gloating, and I may do that in some form by releasing a guide, a video guide series of some sort, taking you all through some of the more basic skins and really fill out your locker without spending perhaps too much money. The problem is right now, because I just got a legendary, I have almost 0 karma, and many of these things cost karma. But there are some big gaps people won't be able to fill in their account vaults at the moment, and you've mentioned one of them, the Masquerade armor. For those of you who don't know, there were a few armor sets in the game, I believe one for each armor class, that you could previously only get in PvP. They did not exist in PvE. It was just impossible. There was nowhere to drop them, no vendor sold them. It was just you had to PvP and you could only wear it in PvP. However, now that it's combined, we've got this weird situation where players like me who have PvP'd in the past, I have a totally unique armor set. I've got the Masquerade set. I can walk around in that and be, I guess, a bit of a snowflake for it. But that is quite unfair, I feel, and I think ArenaNet should be looking into adding that for the PvE environment too, especially for the collectors out there. I have heard people saying that these armors were originally in the game meant to be personal story armors. Of course, when we complete the personal story, we get the packed weapons, which again were only added after launch, and sometimes when you complete a personal story step, you'll get a unique armor skin, as many of you are aware that maybe you might not be able to get elsewhere. But it did look like they had these 3 full sets that were supposed to at some point be awarded to you through the personal story and were like exclusive to it, which is a cool idea. I appreciate that, and it never really went through. So maybe this is ArenaNet's time to go back to their personal story and say, aha, okay, we'll add these armors specifically in through the personal story for people as rewards will retroactively compensate those who have already completed the personal story, and it would be impossible for them to do it again now. And there you go, now it's available for the vault. And maybe while they're at it, they can let us sell those armors, and maybe there'll be some profit in running the personal story over and over again. I highly doubt it, but hey, one can dream, right? Wouldn't it be cool? I'm just saying, wouldn't it be cool if the packed weapons at the end of the personal story were really flashy and really cool and had real value to them? So there was like a way of earning money in this game by speed clearing the personal story in some way. I think that'd be awesome. Keep people making new characters, go into the earlier level zones, but hey, whatever. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess right now. I have it, so I shouldn't worry too much, but I think ArenaNet should do some kind of patch at some point. The next question is from Dozer, who says, question for UWP. When you started with Guild Wars 2, you did not like the Mesmer as you felt the class changed too much from Guild Wars 1, so you moved to Ellie. In the last few months, you seem to be liking it a bit more. What has changed my mind? What has changed my mind is nothing to do with Guild Wars 1 mechanics. It's still nothing like the Guild Wars 1 Mesmer, but I do appreciate that when you are dungeon running, if you are running a Mesmer, you can carry the team. Like, if you have a friend and you're like, yeah, we'll just duo it, we're fully geared, we know what we're doing, we know how to sack, and you just, like, try and go ham through it with just double warrior, you can run into some serious issues. However, if one of you plays a Mesmer and you know where to pull enemies, you know how to reflect, you know how to cleanse people at the right time in specific circumstances, you know when to drop the stability, you can carry people through a lot of stuff, particularly Ara. If you're playing a Mesmer, there's certain stuff. I've had a lot of really awful runs through Path 1 of Ara, but if you jump on a Mesmer, Path 1 of Ara, if people don't know, if you wipe on Loopy, the waypoint is miles and miles and miles back, and it's also through a long running section that can be quite difficult for a lot of people new to the dungeon. You run a Mesmer, however, and you can port through people through all of that stuff. If you're on the Mesmer, you can trust yourself to actually feed back the giant nuke that Loopy does. There's a lot of things that you can do on Mesmer that allows you to get through stuff nicely. And the gameplay itself, I mean, who doesn't like dropping a reflect that basically one-shots stuff? There's a moment in Sorrow's Embrace where, particularly with the new scaling, you fight Sorrow's Embrace Path 1, you fight 3 golems all at once, and these are heavy projectile-based golems. One of them uses a lightning ability called Living Lightning that bounces constantly through you and your allies, but it's a projectile. If you reflect it, it starts bouncing through the golems constantly. If you've got a friend who's on Elementalist and he Fiery Greatsword rushes, you just melt them in like quarter of a second. It's the most fantastic thing ever, and it's enabled because of these reflects in these plays, and that's why I've been enjoying Mesmer. It's not fully geared, so you know, I'm on a big Elementalist kick, I've got to admit. At the moment I'm really going for ascended everything on my Elementalist right now and having a lot of fun with it, but Mesmer, I appreciate it a lot more now, I'll say that much. It's a class with a ton of utility, and that helps you through a lot of things. The next question is from Andre Van, who says, could you please do a video discussing the Largos, if data permits, of course. Thank you. Well, thank you, actually, for saying if data permits. This question comes up all the time. My answer is always, I'm sorry, but there's not enough information. My Largos video would be like 5 minutes max saying, oh, this is a dynamic event where they're talking about an unseen hunter, and it turned out to be a Largos. Oh my god. Here's another event where basically it's the same story. Here's a little bit in the personal story where you meet one specific Largos who tells you about some stuff. Here's some hints that there are the Tetios houses, and they sound like they have a rich culture. And that's it, you know, and then maybe a bit of copy-paste from the friggin' official wiki on what they've said. There's so little on the Largos. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, I will add. It means I can't do a video on it, but they have taken the role of a very mysterious race that clearly has people intrigued. This is why I get the question a lot. And I think that's important for the series right now. The Masart used to be in that place, but I feel really they're not so much anymore. There's still mystery and things people want to know about that race, but the Largos have really stepped up in that respect. I have no doubts that eventually we will get to learn more about the Largos, but it's not relevant right now and there's just not enough information. I'm so sorry. I will do you a favour though. In the description you can find a link to the wiki page if you want to read the cookie cutter standard information we have about them, and maybe that will please you. The next and final question is from Brandon Holbird, who says, do you think every dungeon should have a special weapon that can drop that isn't able to be sold? Also, it would be insanely rare, like a 1 in a million drop, you know? What do you think? Well, why would you make it so that it can't be sold? I guess you want the idea that if you see someone with this, you know that they're like an expert of that dungeon somehow. But in all seriousness, this is just another big RNG thing that some players will get that drop and not really appreciate it in the first place. I think making it tradable adds value to the dungeon in a much bigger way than having it be account bound. Even though I do appreciate that, say, fractal weapons are implemented really well. And you know if you see someone with a fractal weapon, for example, they've probably done a fair amount of fractals. The reason I picked this question was because of an interesting thought I had earlier, again, while dungeon running, can you tell I've been doing this quite a lot? We were in COF Path 2, and in COF Path 2, there is a specific moment where you drag an NPC to a lump of ore in the dungeon, and he's using this ore because he wants to blow some stuff up. And during this specific part of the dungeon, if you look in the top right where the events information usually is, you'll see that there's a timer as if you have to defend the NPC, but it ticks down really quickly. This is because it used to be an element of the path that the devs removed sometime after launch. What's really curious about it though is that timer starts at 30 minutes. It starts dialed all the way at 30 minutes. What does this mean? It means that in the original implementation of the dungeon, ArenaNet's original vision for how long explorable paths would take would be this one encounter where this character is trying to mine this ore and you're defending it from NPCs. They had dialed all the way to 30 minutes. You'll also remember that at launch, it was much harder to come by tokens, and at least getting the dungeon-specific armors and weapons were also tuned really high. And I find it very curious to think about that original vision that ArenaNet had for the dungeons, and is so obviously completely discarded at this point, and how the game would feel then. How would the game feel if every single explorable path of a dungeon was long, arduous, multiple hours to complete, only the best of players would get it done maybe multiple times in a day, with really specific routes and setups where they're really taking advantage of, say, specific sigils to do extra damage to foes in that dungeon, and the potions that are buyable from those vendors? What if this original idea was pushed through to all of Guild Wars 2? And I think it would provide something that maybe you're asking for here. It would mean that every time you did see someone in COF armor, you would stop and think, God damn, wow, that is a person who has spent tons of time in that dungeon and truly mastered the dungeon. When you see someone with a weapon from a dungeon, you know that they played at a really significant amount. And maybe that's what you're looking for with this question, an idea of a really rare thing that drops just once, so that when you get it, you're like, yeah, I'm a master of this dungeon. This shows my dedication to this one specific place on Tyria. And we just don't have that experience. I'm not really making a statement either way here as to whether I'd prefer that or not. Frankly, the idea of standing in a tiny little space defending against the same trash mobs for half an hour sounds incredibly boring. But if there was some perfect world where the design of the environments and the challenges you were passing themselves remained engaging for the entirety of that time, maybe that could have been a much better place for Guild Wars 2's dungeon endgame to have been. But yeah, just an interesting thought. That was the last question. Thank you very much for watching the Q&A for today, guys. If you've got any questions, please do feel free to leave them down below. I haven't talked about lore that much lately, so if you've got any lore-based questions, do feel free to ask me. There is very likely going to be a lore video tomorrow, maybe that will get your brains whirling, specifically around Season 2 Living World stuff. I want to have some big discussion as that goes forward. Anyway, I hope you guys are having fun with the feature patch. I've still got so many goals, so many things to go for, and I hope you do too. Cheers, guys. I'll catch you next time.